In this video, we're going to look at how to create a basic label using the 4-step label creation method in Lighthouse for Mac 6. The beauty of this method is that it can be used to create pretty much any kind of sign or label that is required, whether this be something like a health and safety sign, like a warning sign that we have here, to something like an asset label, to continuous improvement signage, pipe markers, and many more. The basic processes always remain the same. So as an example, let's try and create the label file that we have on the screen here. So firstly, you'll need to open your software and you'll then be presented with a default label size on the screen. This can vary depending on the printer type that you are using, but the basic processes will always remain the same. Now, of course, we do not need to stick with the label size that's on the screen at the moment. You may want to create something that is much smaller or even much longer than the label that's on the screen at the moment, and of course create a batch of labels as well. Quite commonly, when people do create labels that are much smaller than the template on the screen, we do often see these being designed in the top left corner, and then this design is copied and pasted across the white space as per the usual with Word, which is understandable. However, this can be quite time consuming and can also open you up to the human error element side of things. As you begin to copy and paste things across this space, there is every chance that information could be missed. So instead, the software can do this hard work for you instead, and it can duplicate the label files for you, as well as changing the size on the screen. So to do this, firstly, double click in the grey space outside of the label and a label setup box will pop up for you with a few tabs across the top. The printer tab, it doesn't need to be worried about too much. You've just set this as you opened up the label file, so you can head straight to the paper layout tab. And inside of here you have the orientation. So just like in Word, you can choose whether you would like to print in portrait or landscape. It's always worth playing around with this because you can often reduce any kinds of wastage or unused material and save yourself money along the way. This can be changed at any point during the label design as well. Once you're happy with this setting, you can then head to the Dimensions tab, and it's inside of here where you tell the software the size of the label that you would like to create, as well as creating a batch of labels should you need to do so. So firstly, I'm going to instruct the software of the label size that I would like to create. So I can type inside the width 50mm and the height 50mm as per our example. You see as I type these inside, the preview on the right hand side will then update to reflect the kind of label that it is that I would like to print. Underneath here we then have the margins, which should automatically be set to 5mm, and you can leave them as they are. A little further down we then have the labels across section with rows and columns, and it's in here where you tell the software how many labels you would like to set up to print as a batch. So if I increase my rows, you'll see an additional label is added underneath the original, and if I increase the columns, they are then added to the right hand side of this. This is because I am still technically in the landscape orientation. If I try to add any further rows underneath these labels, this will not let me do so, and it's because the software will know how many labels can fit into the overall parameter of the material based on the printer that you're using. So in this instance, with a height of 50mm using the CPM 100, I cannot add any more as we're using the full 100mm width of the material in landscape mode. Once you're happy with the amounts of labels that you would like to print and the sizes, click OK, and the software will update to present the label file on the screen as you would like. You'll also notice inside of here as well that there will be grey boxes. These grey boxes just represent duplicated labels, and anything that you do design in the white space is automatically copied and pasted into these grey boxes. Now initially during the design process you won't see anything happening on these boxes. That's just to reduce any confusion. However, you can always preview the labels at any time you please. Now in terms of the 4-step basic label creation method, we have already completed the first step at this stage. So we have chosen the size and orientation of the label and also instructed the software how many labels we would like to print as a batch. The second step would be then to insert any text information into the labels, so whether this is fixed information or variable based information. The third step would be to introduce any kinds of graphics into the labels, as well as any kind of barcodes if needed as well. The fourth step is then to introduce a cut shape into the label, so to tell the software that we would like to cut these labels out. So heading back to step 2, we can insert text onto our labels. So we have the toolbar on the left hand side and we have 3 different text options to choose from. So we have text, curved text and text box. The curved text is as it says on the tin. We can choose this option, click on the label and type our information inside and some curved text will be created. Fairly simple one to use. However, the 2 that you will be using most commonly will of course be text and text box. And these have their pros and cons depending on what you're doing inside the software. However, you may notice that you use one more often than most. In this instance, we're going to use the text option first at the top, but we will take a look at both of these. So to use any of these options, just click on the option you want to use first, and then click onto the label, and it will become active. So we can now start typing in the information required. Once you're happy, click away from the text. It's then inserted into the label and becomes active, so you can then start to move the text around and resize as required. Just like in Word, you can also choose different font types as well from the list. All of the usuals will be inside of here alongside any personalised fonts that you may have installed on the computer separately as well. There is also the sizing in the list as well, which you can also type in the box if you need a very specific size. And of course, bold, italic and underline as per Word. Now, the one thing that the software doesn't have in comparison to Word is a spell check. The reason for this is many people do use the software to design signs and labels that are multi-language. So getting a dictionary to cover all these bases is very difficult to do so. However, you can have the text checked outside of the software first and you can then copy and paste it into the software once you're happy. But if you have already written something onto the label and you need to make an alteration, there's no need to delete and replace. You can just edit the text on the screen. So to do this, quite simply double click the text that's on the label and a setup box will pop up for you to be able to make changes. So in this instance, I want to add something further into that text. Quite simply click OK and this will then be updated on the label for you. Now these setup boxes you'll see me using frequently. This is by far the easiest way to make alterations to anything that's on the label. So whether this is a piece of text, a graphic, a cut shape, a barcode, anything at all, if you double click it, you will then be able to make modifications and you'll notice there are multiple tabs inside this box for you to make alterations as you please, as well as elsewhere in the software. You'll get used to this with time and you'll find your flow with this as you get used to the software. Next, we'll take a look at text box. So we will click on the text box option on the left hand toolbar, click on the label, and the setup box will appear automatically at this point and ask you to type information inside here to begin with. So we shall type the same thing in again. Press OK, and this text box is then created on the screen for you to then begin to manipulate. Now if we do click away from this text box, you'll notice there is a black dashed line around the outside of the text and it's much larger than the text that's on the screen. This black dashed line will not print. These text boxes work in the same way as text boxes use in Word, so therefore you will allocate a space that is available for text, and anything that you put inside that text box will not go beyond the boundaries of that box. So this means you could in fact place some text onto your label that is very close to the edge of a label. You can update the text that's inside that box and it will never wander into the label next door or potentially interfere with anything else that might be on your label file. So most commonly people will use this text box with variable based information. So you can link the software to things like Excel spreadsheets that contain data and also create sequential numbers, and therefore that information could vary quite wildly in terms of its length, and therefore you don't want that to wander outside of the label or interfere with anything else. For information on how to link your label files to Excel spreadsheets or create sequential numbers, please see our additional user guides or get in touch and we'll happily provide assistance. However, for the time being, to keep this simple, we're going to remove the text box from the label file and stick with our original text. The software does also have an alignment toolbar, so if you'd like to place something very specifically within your label file, there is the option to do this either by hand and by eye, or you can get the software to do this for you instead. So for example, if we wanted this text at the very center of the label, we can get the software to do that for us rather than doing it ourselves. So to do this, just select the object, so in this instance the text, and once selected, towards the top of the software is our alignment toolbar. If you hover over these buttons, they will tell you what they do. So we have left, center and right, top, vertical center and bottom. Now if we do press these buttons at the moment, nothing will happen with the object on the screen. To use these buttons, quite simply keep your finger on the control button and then choose the options that you would like, and that will move around the label file for you. So in this instance, if we would like it at the very center of our label, we can click the center option going left to right, and then the vertical center option to make sure that everything is bang on in the middle of the label. This will then be applied to the additional label files for us as well. Now in this instance, I want to place my text at the very bottom. I'll increase the size and then centralize that to make it much neater. So once you have inserted your text onto your label, that is essentially the second step complete. So you can then move to the third step, which is to introduce any graphics or potentially any barcodes or QR codes should they be required as well. Now the software does have a gallery of images to be able to use straight away that will print in the best quality. Should you wish to use these, quite simply click on the picture option on the left hand toolbar and then click onto your label. This will then open a browsing window, and at the bottom of this browsing window will be a button that says Clip Art Gallery. Click on this button, an additional window will open for you. Next to the CPM option, click the arrow and the categories will then appear for you. These categories are in alphabetical order, so to try and make them a little easier to navigate around, but you will notice in some of these categories, some of them will have single colour images, some will have multicolour images, and then others that will have multicolour images as well as single colour images. So for example, our warning triangle that we have here, we have in yellow and black, and we also have it in a single colour a little bit further down as well. The main reason for this is to try and provide you with the cheapest method of being able to print your signs and labels. So to print yourself a warning sign in the cheapest method, you can print this black single colour symbol onto a yellow vinyl and you have created yourself a warning symbol in the correct colours in the cheapest method. Now of course, a lot of people do use the white vinyl just because of the versatility, in which case you would use the yellow and black version of this symbol to print the yellow and print the black onto a white vinyl. Therefore a little bit more expensive, but there are options and versatility inside the software, and you will get used to it with time as you use the software to find which is best for you to create your signs and labels. However, once you're happy with an image that you have selected, press OK, and this is then inserted into the label file where you can move it around in exactly the same way as we did with our text earlier on. You can insert as many pictures into your label files as you please. There is no restriction on this. So for example, I'm going to insert the single colour warning symbol as well. Now you can change the colours of some of the symbols inside of the software. However, there is a specific method to be able to do this. Now to change the colour of text inside the software, this is very simple. Quite simply click on the text and click on the colour bar at the top to create something a little bit more bespoke. However, if you do attempt to do this with any of the clip art graphics, you will notice that nothing happens to begin with. The main reason for this is to generally keep the colours of the symbols that are already set to the colours they need to be under the particular legislation for them. However, you can make a modification to these images and be able to change the colours. So firstly, I'm going to select my single colour graphic and double click that graphic to open its settings box. In the tabs across the top, click on the status tab, and at the very bottom of this tab is a box that is ticked and is called Separate Colours During Print. This is the barrier that is stopping you from being able to change the colour of that graphic. So quite simply untick this box, press OK, and you'll then be able to create something a little bit more bespoke should it be required. Now this method can also be applied to the multicolour images as well, so we can double click the yellow and black version, head to the status tab and untick this box as well. However, when we press OK with this, that image then becomes solid and it does not work quite correctly. So it's recommended if you do want to create any bespoke kind of symbols, try and find its single colour alternative and change the colour of this, and you won't come across too many issues with being able to change these colours. Don't panic if you do ever do this at all. You can rectify the image. You can either delete it and replace it, or quite simply double click the image again to bring its setup box back. Go to the status tab and retick the box at the bottom, press OK, and the image will be returned to normal. In addition to clip art gallery images, you can also insert your own images into the software to be able to print these off. To pop these inside, quite simply, click on the picture option on the left hand side, click onto the label, and quite simply browse around on your computer for the image that is required. Depending on the printer type that you have, you can use different formats. The best format to be able to print imagery inside the software is in a Windows Metafile format, or WMF for short. However, some of our printers can print JPEGs, PDF, PNGs and so on. For advice on which is the best to use, please feel free to get in touch and we'll be happy to advise. In this instance, I want to insert the Lighthouse logo as a Windows Metafile. So quite simply click this, press open, and the image is then inserted into the software. This can then be resized and moved around as required. Additionally, in the third step, you may also want to introduce barcodes into your labels. This is very simple to do so. So quite simply, click on the barcode option on the left hand side, click onto your label, and a setup box will appear where you can then type the information inside. So for example, I want to put in the Lighthouse website as a QR code. So I can quite simply type this information inside the box that appeared. And then to make sure this is set as a QR code, click on the barcode tab at the top, and we have a drop down list of all the relevant barcode types. These are in alphabetical order, which makes it nice and easy to navigate. We can click on QR, press OK, and the software then generates a QR code that will print in the best possible method and solidly. The benefit of being able to see this on the screen is the information can quite often be scanned. So if you do ever want to make sure that the information is correct, you are welcome to do so with a mobile phone or a scanner should you need to. Once you have your images and any necessary barcodes inside as required, that's the third step complete, and you can move to the fourth and final step, which is to introduce a cut shape into the label. So to tell the software how we would like this label to be cut out. The cut shapes live in the clip art gallery. So again, quite simply click on the picture option on the left hand side, click onto your label, click on clip art gallery, and again under the CPM option, press the drop down arrow to the side and head to the cut shape section. The images that you see inside this section are all automatically set to cut out and will not print. There are many squares, rectangles, and the further down in this category you'll find circles, triangles, and more bespoke images towards the bottom. Quite simply find the image that is required, click on it, press OK, and it's inserted into the software. You'll then see with this particular shape that a dagger will appear in the corner. This is to notify you that this will cut out for you. Now quite often these cut shapes will not be the correct size when inserted into the software, so they can be resized as required. The easiest way to do this is to get the software to do this for you. So quite simply double click somewhere in the middle of your cut shape to open its settings box. Head to the appearance tab at the top, and then we'll have the width and height of that cut shape as it's currently set. So in this instance, I just want to make it the same size as my label, so I can quite simply type in the label size that I put in the very beginning, so 50 by 50, press OK. That's now the correct size for what I need, and I can then use the alignment toolbar to place this around the outside of the label perfectly. So quite simply keep your finger on the control button and press the center option left to right and the vertical center option, and the cut shape is put in place. You can insert as many cut shapes into the label as you please. There is no restriction on this, but once your cut shapes have been inserted into the labels, this is the fourth step complete, and you can then head to print your labels. The best method to do so before you do head to print is to zoom out to be able to see the additional labels. You can use your magnifying glasses, or we do have some shortcuts here. The best one to use is the zoom to page method. Then head to print. A box will then appear with the option to choose labels or pages. It's very simple to know which options to choose at this point, just by keeping a very simple rule inside your head. Should you have any grey boxes on the screen, so whether this is one grey box or hundreds of grey boxes, so one or more grey boxes, choose the pages option. Now once you've chosen this selection, before you do go to print, try and get yourself in the habit of pressing preview. When you do this, all of your labels will then be displayed on the screen. However, if you do happen to choose the labels option and leave this as labels 1 and then head to preview, instead the screen will look like this. If we did proceed to print these labels, the printer will still print and cut out this one label here. However, there will be nothing else printed on the space that is left over, and this material will also be fed out of the machine in its entirety and guillotined off the roll, so it could be a very large source of wastage. This is why it's recommended to preview before you do print, just to make sure that everything appears as it should do so. So if this is ever the case, click on the Finish button in the corner, head back to print, choose Pages and preview one more time, and essentially, as long as you can see all of your labels on the screen, this is what will then happen when you choose to press the Print button. If everything looks correct and you're happy to do so, click this button and the information will be sent to the printer where it will then print and cut.